Now, a great pleasure. Joining me this evening is Senator Ted Cruz, member of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you, Senator Cruz. I appreciate you coming on very much. I have a bunch of things to talk about, but, you know, his Republicans, MAGA Republicans are semi-fascist and don't like democracy. Looks like it's really backfired on him.
Yeah.
I wonder what you're thinking, and I wonder what you're hearing down in Texas.
Well, listen, I think that's exactly right. And, you know, I got to say, look, we've all seen in politics where one political party will demonize the opposing party. That's not unusual. It's not unusual for Joe Biden to call Donald Trump terrible things. It's not unusual for Trump to call Biden terrible things. That's part of the political process. What today's Democrats have crossed into is a very different threshold, where what Joe Biden is doing now is not demonizing Republican office holders. He's demonizing the voters. He's attacking the tens of millions of people who voted for Donald Trump, who stood up against him. He's calling half of the country fascists. You know, we saw a few weeks ago Kathy Hochul, the Democratic governor of New York, say, if you're a Republican in New York, and by the way, Larry, you're a Republican in New York, she said, get out. You're not a real New Yorker. Get the hell out of New York. Go to Florida where you belong. I got to tell you, I've never seen a politician tell half their voters, get out of my state. You know, I represent the state of Texas. There are millions of Democrats in the state of Texas. I disagree with them on some policy issues, but it's still my job as an elected official to represent them, to fight for their rights, to fight for their interests. And the arrogance, the contempt for the voters, the contempt for democracy it takes for them to refer to half the country as fascists and say, get out of the state, get out of the country, it really is a dangerous and ominous new term.
By the way, Senator Cruz, I'd go to Texas myself. That's what I would do. I just want to...
Well, here, and you are invited anytime. You can get a nice little ranch in Texas that's maybe 10,000 acres. I keep trying to invite Sean Hannity to move down. You can get adjoining ranches down there.
All right. It'll be my pleasure. Along these lines, look, Biden has been in complete denial constantly about open borders. Now, we've talked about the evils of open borders, a couple of million illegals crossing, what it's done to the local towns and law and order, the sex trafficking. But I know you focused on the fentanyl scourge. We talked about it last night on the show. I want to talk about it some more with you. Biden never even mentions the word fentanyl. From what I can gather, never even mentions the issue of drugs. And, of course, he is in denial that this is caused by these open borders. But the question for you, Senator, is the remainder of this session, and let's say that the cavalry comes and you take the Senate in the next session, what can and should be done about this scourge of fentanyl, which is killing so many Americans?
Look, the number one thing we have to do is secure our southern border. Joe Biden entered office and made a political decision to open up the border, to refuse to enforce the law. We've now had, in just a year and a half under Joe Biden, 4.2 million people cross illegally into this country. It's the highest rate of illegal immigration in 62 years. And the explosion of drug trafficking. Last year, we had 100,000 people die of overdoses. Just in my home state of Texas, we had over 1,600 people overdose on fentanyl. And I got to say, the Joe Biden body bags, they keep piling up and up and up. And what is causing it is this president, this vice president, this attorney general refuses to enforce the law. When they catch a trafficker, they let him go. They follow catch and release. And they engage in a state of unbelievable denial. You know, just a few days ago, the White House press secretary stood up and said, nobody is walking across the border crossing illegally. And it was a brazen lie. We're used to press flack spinning. It's fairly unusual for a White House press secretary to simply look at the press and flat out lie. I invited Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary. I said, come down to the southern border, come to the Rio Grande Valley, spend 1 hour with me on the border. I'll take you out with the Border Patrol Union on midnight patrol, and we will encounter dozens, if not hundreds, of illegal aliens any hour of the day we do it in. And what I suggested to her is let's bring the entire White House press corps, and after that 1 hour, after those 60 minutes, if we don't encounter anybody, I'll come up in front of the press corps and say I was wrong, but that's not going to happen. Reality will intrude, and when we encounter dozens or even hundreds of illegal immigrants in whatever hour she picks, does she have the courage and integrity to stand in front of the White House press corps and say, I lied to you? Because that's what Joe Biden is paying her to do, to lie and to claim the open borders we have don't exist.
So did she respond? I mean, would she go down there? Biden's never gone down there. Kamala Harris never went down there. Not really. I think she was an hour or two away. What did the press secretary say?
So when I extended the first invitation, she responded and said, I don't need to be lectured by a Republican senator on the border. She didn't address the fact that she was lying. And she also said, I went to the border in 2018 under Donald Trump, and I saw the Trump cages. Now, what she was admitting is she's never been there under Joe Biden. She's never seen the Joe Biden cages, which are bigger, which are filled with more children, which are worse than they have ever been. And the sad reality is she doesn't care. The reason she doesn't go is the same reason Joe Biden doesn't go. It's the same reason Kamala Harris doesn't go to the Rio Grande Valley, because if they come, the TV cameras will follow. And if the TV cameras follow, they will see the misery, the disaster. You cannot defend the deaths, the sexual abuses, the physical abuses, the disease, the crime of this chaos in South Texas. It's why South Texas is going to turn red. And I got to tell you, Larry, they're counting on the corrupt corporate media to ignore them. Every reporter in that White House press briefing ought to write a story fact-checking her statement. And if it's anything other than pants on fire, then those reporters are complicit in the lie, because it is objectively, directly false, and she's counting on the media never holding her to account.
You know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but not being part of the mainstream media, it would just seem to me, Senator, that this fentanyl problem, which is growing, and as you say, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are getting killed by it. This is something that cries out for what used to be some kind of bipartisan solution in the interests of America, in the interests of our kids, in the interests of safety, drug education, and so forth. And yet, you never hear that. I mean, Biden makes a lot of promises, says a lot of different things. This is one thing he never talks about. And I think it's on everybody's mind. It's an election issue, but it's bigger than an election issue. And for the life of me, I mean, I don't want to be naive, because I've been down there. I've had 2 tours in the federal government myself. But the fact is, there ought to be a bipartisan solution. This is such a big issue.
Well, there really should be, and I don't think there's a family in America that addiction and substance abuse has not touched, and touched tragically. My older sister, Miriam, died of a drug overdose, and so, I mean, I know firsthand the pain and agony this has caused, and it's gotten so much worse. It's gotten so much worse in the last year and a half, and I got to say, Larry, the sad thing is, there are no moderate Democrats left in the United States Senate. I've teed up multiple amendments trying to address the open borders. I teed up an amendment that said we should not send federal government stimulus checks to millions of illegal immigrants in the United States. Every single Democrat voted no. I had another amendment that said we shouldn't send stimulus checks to criminals currently incarcerated in jail right now. Every single Democrat voted no. It failed by 1 vote. I had another amendment that said we should keep Title 42 in place, which protects against public health pandemics from illegal immigrants. Every single Democrat voted no. The problem is today's Democratic Party in Congress, they're more scared of the radical left. They're scared of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and AOC than they are of the voters in the general election. And it's why I agreed with your opening riff. I think November is going to be a phenomenal election. I think Republicans are going to retake both the House and Senate. The corporate media is desperately trying to peddle a story that it's going to be a great election for Democrats. It's utter and complete nonsense, because the Biden agenda has failed catastrophically.
Yes, and I think he's failed, too. I really do.
Yeah.
I just think he has failed, and he's gone over the line. Senator Ted Cruz, sir, always wonderful to see you. Thanks very much for your time.